When my uncle died, I inherited a piece of land near Abomey in southern Benin. I hadn't been back to the country since I was a teenager. My parents had emigrated to France when I was young, and though I still spoke Fon and remembered the rhythms of life from my childhood, I no longer felt like I belonged there. But the notary's letter was clear. The land, small and crescent-shaped, sat on the outskirts of a village called Zunhui, more a cluster of houses than a town, really. The notary said it came with a small house and a warning. My uncle had written it himself, though he died from something as unremarkable as old age. The warning was short. If you must visit, do not cut the tree. Let her be. I thought it was a joke. Something poetic, or just one of those riddles elders like to leave behind. I hadn't seen my uncle in over 20 years. We weren't close. But when I stood before the rust-red soil of the land, with its cracked earth and solitary house, the mango tree stood out immediately. It was massive, older than any tree I'd ever seen, its limbs heavy with fruit that shimmered in the sunlight like gold. It grew just behind the house, roots bursting from the earth like fingers desperate to hold on. The house was in decent condition. Metal roof, concrete walls, faded blue shutters. Dust had claimed most of the furniture. I swept it clean, aired it out, and spent the night on an old cot with a mosquito net hanging over me like a ghost. That night, I dreamed of a woman. She stood beneath the mango tree, back to me. Her head was wrapped in white cloth, her dress old-fashioned, handmade. I couldn't see her face. I couldn't hear her voice, but I felt her emotions. Grief, mostly. Heavy, slow-moving grief that seemed to stick to the inside of my ribs. In the dream, she reached toward the tree and touched it, her hand resting on the bark for a moment. When she turned to me, I woke up before I could see her face. It wasn't terrifying, just sad. I wrote it off as an echo of my jet lag and the surrealness of being back in a place I barely remembered. But the next morning, I found a handful of mangoes arranged in a perfect circle just outside the front door. They were fresh, still glistening with dew. No bite marks, no sign of animals. I didn't eat them. I asked a villager the next day about the tree. An older man named Mathieu, who wore a short-sleeved shirt with half the buttons missing, and spoke softly, as if the air itself had ears. When I mentioned the tree behind the house, his expression changed, not fearful, but careful. "That tree is very old," he said. "Older than anyone here. Your uncle respected it." I asked why. He only said it belonged to her, before the land was anyone's. She never left again. I thought it was a story, a folktale for tourists or disconnected relatives like me. But something about his voice made me hesitate before laughing it off. That night, I dreamed of her again. This time, she stood closer. Still no face. Still that same hand on the tree. But I heard something, a chant maybe, soft and rhythmic, like the lapping of water in a clay basin. It didn't frighten me, but it made me cry in the dream. When I woke, my pillow was damp. The circle of mangoes had moved closer, almost touching the door now. By the fourth night, the air changed. The crickets were silent. Even the frogs near the marsh fell quiet. I woke suddenly, long before dawn, and smelled smoke, not fire, not wood, but something older, like dried herbs and scorched stone. I stepped outside, barefoot, and the air was cold despite the season. She was there, not in a dream, not imagined. She stood beneath the mango tree, just as in my dreams, only this time she turned to face me. She had no eyes, or rather she had hollows where eyes should have been, filled with shadow. Her mouth didn't move, but her presence wrapped itself around me like vines, not violent but firm, demanding attention. I stepped closer, Something held me still, not fear, reverence. The tree above her swayed, though there was no wind. The mangoes trembled on their branches. I watched as she raised one hand and pointed, not at me, but at the house. And then I heard the voice. Do not forget. I don't know if it was hers. It could have been inside my own mind. But it was clear, low, and woven with an exhaustion so deep it cracked. The air snapped, the vision broke, and I was alone. The next day I packed my bags. I didn't want to stay any longer. Not out of fear, but because I knew I had disturbed something meant to remain undisturbed. I locked the door, placed the key under a stone like my uncle used to, and turned back toward the road. That's when I saw the box. It was sitting at the base of the mango tree. Small, wooden, with rusted hinges and symbols carved into the lid. Symbols I didn't recognize, though something about them felt familiar. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were scraps of cloth, bones small enough to be from a bird, and a photograph. The photo was black and white, faded with age. It showed a young woman standing beside the same tree. Her face was sharp, serious, eyes fixed on the camera with a strength that pierced decades. I didn't recognize her, but the resemblance to my own grandmother was unmistakable. I brought the box back to the house. Over the following days, I asked villagers what they knew. It took time. Most didn't want to talk. But piece by piece I learned. The woman in the photo was named Aluna. She was a healer, midwife, and practitioner of Vodun. Not the cartoon version, but the real kind. She lived on the land before it was parcelled out by the colonial administration. She treated people when doctors failed, but she angered someone, a jealous neighbour maybe, and was accused of witchcraft in the worst sense. They burned her house, tried to burn her too, but she disappeared before they could. The mango tree, they said, grew from the ashes of her home. Some say she planted it herself, others say it sprouted on its own. Either way, it became sacred, and those who left offerings at its base were never harmed. My uncle knew this. He was the only one brave enough to build near it, but he never touched the tree, never cut a branch, never picked a fruit. He tended the earth around it and poured libations when it bloomed. I understood now. She wasn't angry with me. She was reminding me who she was, what she endured, and that she was still there, rooted in the soil, watching over the land that had tried to erase her. I stayed another week. I cleaned the tree's base, cleared the dead leaves. I arranged the mangoes she had left in a spiral around the box and spoke aloud, not expecting a reply. I thanked her. I acknowledged her. I promised to leave the land untouched or pass it on only to someone who understood. The last night I spent there, I dreamed one final time. She stood under the tree. Her face was whole. Her eyes were clear and steady. And she smiled. Just once. Then she turned and walked into the tree itself, disappearing into the bark, as if it had always been a part of her. When I woke, the air felt lighter. The mangoes were gone. No more circles. No more silence. The frogs sang again. The breeze returned. I left that morning. I haven't returned since. But I think of her often. I see her sometimes in the corners of my dreams. Not as a warning, not as a threat, but as a guardian. And every year, when the mangoes ripen where I live now, I leave one under the tallest tree I can find. Just in case, she's still listening.